it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 16 of my 2022 holiday card series. Today I'm going to be making a card using Lawn Fawn's Car Critters Christmas add-on and Tiny Christmas. So I've stamped those images out on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm starting with E50 and E51, and I'm doing Santa's face and hands, and then Rudolph's face, antlers, and hooves. Just adding in a little E51 and blending out with the E50. They're so super tiny that just the two shades was plenty. And then I'm going to use E55 and E57. I'm going to color in the trunks of my two trees. And I'm also going to color in the rest of Rudolph's body. So I'm using that E57 first and adding in a little shading, just using the very tip of my marker to keep that color inside the lines, and then blending that out with the E55. So just using two shades because they're so small. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to move on to some reds, and I'm going to use R22, R24, and R29, and I'm going to do Santa's outfit, so his hat and his jacket and his little pants. So just skipping the areas that I want to be white, like the cuffs and the hem of his jacket, and then of course the brim of his hat and the pom-pom. So I use the R29 first, blend it out with the R24, and then just using a sliver of that R22 wherever there was some room for that. And then while I have these red shades out, I'm also going to do the bow on my Christmas wreath, putting the darkest shades on the center part where that fabric is gathered, and then on the underside of the little extra pieces that are hanging down. And then I'm also going to do some of the gifts. So I'm going to do the ribbon on the bottom gift and then the wrapping paper on the top gift. So again, just squeezing in all three of those shades, although honestly two of them would have been fine, but I just decided to squeeze in all three. And then I'm going to move on to some toner grays. I'm using T3, T5, and T7. And I'll do the steering wheel and Santa's boots and also the tires on the car. So I'm just going to start with that T7 and then blend out with the T5, which will be most of it there, especially like Santa's boots are just the darkest two shades, but I did throw in a little T3 on the top of the steering wheel and the edges of the tires. Then I used the T3 to add just a touch of shading to the white parts of Santa's outfit and blended that out with T1. Then I did just the T1 to add a little shading to Santa's beard and mustache. And then I'm going to switch over to Y000 and Y11. I'm going to use the Y11 for the buckle on Santa's outfit, and then I'll use both of those shades for the headlights on the car. And then I'm going to use some green shades. I'm using G14, G16, and G29. I'll do the Christmas trees with these shades. I'm just starting at the bottom of each tier with the darkest shade, which is the G29, and flicking in an upward motion in nice long strokes, taking up about a third of that space. And then I'll come in with the mid-tone, which is the G16, and make sure that I catch the edge of that G29. So I'm pulling that darkest shade into the mid-tone to help it to blend. And then I'll use the G14 for the top third. And again, just making sure that I grab the edge of the G16 so that everything blends really nicely. And then while I have these shades out, I'm also going to do the Christmas wreath to match. So I'm going to start with that G29 again and put that kind of on the inner part of the circle. and then I'll blend that out with the G16 and fill in the rest with the G14. So I put the highlight at the bottom for this one because I figured that bow is so large that it would be casting a shadow toward the top. Then I'll move over to my pile of presents, and I'm going to do the ribbon on the top gift and the wrapping paper on the center gift. So again, just starting with that darkest shade and blending up with the G16, and then using the G14 for a little bit of highlight on both of those. So then I'm going to move on to some blue tones, and I'm going to use B24, B26, and B29, and I'll do the final gift, the one on the bottom, and then the ribbon on the green package. So I started at the bottom with the B29, blended up with the B26, and the B24 is going to be my highlight. So I think dark blue is a nice combo to add into those regular traditional Christmas red and greens, because it's just reminds me of like a night winter sky. So for the car, I wanted to go something totally different and unexpected. So I decided to do hot pink, because what could be more fun than Santa driving a hot pink Beetle, right? So I'm using RV13, RV14, and RV17. I'm starting with the RV17 and laying in some shadows wherever I think they should go towards the bottom of each section of the car, just kind of dividing it up by section to figure out where my light source should be. And then I'm going to blend that out with the RV14. So I'm pulling toward the top of each of those items, the hood, the little mirrors on the side, the top of the car, and then also just the main body of the car. Kind of blending up with that. And once I have that RV14 all filled in, I'm going to come in with my highlight, which is the RV13, and I'll fill all of the rest of that in. So my concept for this card was like a modern day Santa Claus, and so he doesn't really need his sleigh this time. He's going to take out his fancy new car, and he's not going to drive because normally Rudolph is the one that is leading the way on Christmas. So Rudolph is going to be his navigation again. You know, he's kind of taking Santa, and then Santa can be able to like check his nice and naughty list on his phone or whatever while he's in the passenger seat. So I'm going to take BG10 to add a little bit of snow to the snowdrift that's going to go on top of the car, and then just a little edging around the windshield so that it will look like glass. And then I just have that bumper and the little license plate left. So I'm going to use T3, T1, and T5 for that. Should have done it earlier when I had those shades out, but I just forgot about it. So started with the T5 on the outer edges for the bumper, blended toward the center with the T3, and then I'm using the T1 right under that license plate and put a little on the license plate, keeping it mostly white, and then I just cleaned up where I went out of the lines with the colorless blender. Then I'm going to take RV10 and give Santa and Rudolph some rosy cheeks, and then I'll trim these images out with their matching dies. For my background, I'm going to take the stitched mountain border from Lawn Fawn and also the simple stitched hillside borders and trim out a couple pieces of Bristol smooth surface cardstock. I've also got the excess piece from trimming out that hill, which I'm going to use for the sky. So I'm going to start with some tumbled glass distress oxide ink and just pull that color down from the top edge and down the two sides as well toward that horizon line. And even though that's kind of cut on a curve, it doesn't matter because it's going to be covered up when I place the mountains between the snow and the sky. So I'm just working my way down that panel, darkening it up to a saturation level that I'm happy with. And then I wanted to make that even deeper, especially at the top. So I'm going to bring in some broken china as well. And I'm using light pressure so I can get a smooth blend without any of those kind of blotchy marks that you can sometimes get if you're pressing down too hard. So, and then going back to the tumbled glass ink blending tool, just back and forth until I'm happy with how smooth that is. Then I'll set this panel aside and work on my mountains. So I wanted the background on this scene to be very soft, and that way the brightly colored images in the foreground are going to really pop. So I'm keeping everything really soft and light. So I'm using the same tumbled glass on my mountains toward the bottom, and then I'm going to kind of desaturate that a bit with some hickory smoke so that these mountains have a little bit of a gray tone to them, but still have that frosty look from the tumbled glass. So I'm just starting at the bottom of the mountain range and kind of blending up toward the peak where I'm going to add some little snow caps. So once I'm happy with the gray, I'm going to go back to the tumbled glass and just continue working over that until I get that kind of combo between those two shades that I'm going for. So once I'm happy with the mountain range, I'm going to set this piece aside and work on the snow. So the snow part is going to be fairly easy because I just want to add a bit of a frosty glow and then a street to it. But I wanted the street to also be covered in snow. So I'm taking 2 strips of Post-it tape and making kind of like a wide triangular shape in the center of that hill so that I can add in my little street. And then I'm going back to my tumbled glass and coming in from the Post-it tape and then onto the white part in the center, but not completely covering that and filling it in. I just want that really frosty glow to be there so that it looks like a street that, you know, hasn't been plowed. And I will add a bit of that hickory smoke in the mix as well so that it gives it that kind of dingy look, you know, as it would of, you know, when cars have been driving over it. So just working my way back and forth over that, and then I can peel those masks off and you can kind of see that road taking shape now. And then I'll just take that tumbled glass and add a little bit of frost to the top edge. So once I'm done with that, I'm actually going to go back to my sky, and I want to distress this a bit. So I'm going to take some clean water and just spritz that on an acrylic block to give myself more control. I'll pick that up with a paintbrush and tap it off the edge so I get nice small droplets. And then I'll let that absorb into the paper a bit, and then I'll blot that up with a paper towel so it'll just leave some nice little white highlights in the background, almost like distant falling snow. I also want to add in some more prominent white drops so it really looks like a snowy scene. So I'm going to take some Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White and I'll add some of that to the water on my acrylic block. Just makes it a little bit more fluid. And then I'll splatter that all over the sky as well, just until I'm happy with it. And then I'll set this panel aside to dry. And in the meantime, I'm going to work on my sentiment. So I'm stamping on an extra piece of Bristol using Lawn Fawn lobster ink, and I'm stamping out "I'd be lost without you" because Santa would be lost without Rudolph guiding him, you know, kind of giving a little pun to that whole idea of Santa using Rudolph to guide his sleigh. And I stamped that down a few times to make sure it was nice and bold. And then I'll pop my card base in my MISTI. I'm using some Lawn Fawn Peacock cardstock and Peacock ink. And I'm going to stamp out the car again and then just driving by to say Merry Christmas. And I'll stamp that down a couple times as well to make sure it's nice and bold. Since that ink does dry back a bit, I want to make sure it stays visible. Then I'm taking a couple snowflakes from Winter Dragon and also another little phrase from the license plates that says "Let it snow." Unfortunately, I didn't get that lined up perfectly, so it's a little bit high, but it's fine. It's just the inside of the card. So I'm actually using our latest Lawn Fanatics card sketch to put together this scene, and this one was a bit of a trickier one to me, and so I decided to take the different elements that are in the card sketch and kind of separate them out. So a card sketch is really just a jumping off point. It's supposed to inspire you. So I'll explain how I used it in just a minute, but first I'm going to put together my background, starting with the sky, gluing that down to my card front at the top, and then I'm going to add the mountains over top of that. I'll put the little snow caps on each of the mountains. Those are a separate die, and I just die cut those out of plain cardstock. And then I'm going to take that snowy hillside, and I'm going to add that over top at the bottom. So I'm just going to add my Barely Art Precision Craft Glue and then line that piece up with the bottom two corners and make sure that that is pressed down into place. And then I can bring in my images. So the half circle from that sketch is going to be the car. That's the shape that I'm going with, that rounded curve of the car. But instead of at the top of the scene, I'm going to put it down at the bottom of the scene. I'm adding a thin strip of score tape to the back of the car right below the windshield to attach Rudolph and Santa to. I just figured that was the easiest way to add them to the scene. So I'm going to put Rudolph on the right hand side for the driver's seat as it's facing you in the car, and then Santa over on the left. And then once I have them in there, I can go ahead and glue this to my road. So I'm going to put that down toward the lower part of the scene, and I'm tipping it just the slightest bit toward the right, kind of give you the idea of like the unplowed road and them kind of bumping along. Then I'll take the snowdrift and I'm going to add that to the roof of the car. And then I'm going to take that pile of gifts that Snowdrift didn't want to stay attached there. I'll take the pile of gifts and I'm going to add that tucked behind the Snowdrift. So just kind of lifting up that Snowdrift a little bit so I can put it in there, and also giving the gifts a little tilt to the right to kind of show you how precarious they are. So in that sketch there were two rectangular panels over toward the bottom left. Instead I'm going to slide them up towards the middle left a little bit and add those using the trees. Then I'll put the wreath on the front of the car. So I'm trying to make sure it doesn't cover up too much of that license plate, but also doesn't block too much of Santa and Rudolph's face. So then there's also the flag banner. So I die cut my sentiment using that, but instead of putting it across the trees, which are those two rectangles, I'm just going to put it at the top of the scene. So I basically deconstructed the card sketch and used those elements to inspire me, but I shifted where they appear in this scene, if that makes sense. I'm going to trim off the excess of that banner, and then I'm going to pop this card base back in my MISTI so that I can do a little more stamping on the right hand side to balance out those trees that are on the left. I'm stamping in Manatee ink, and I'm doing the little phrase Jingle Bells and some music notes. And I wanted to have 3 music notes, so I just took one of them and stamped it down a second time. And then I wanted to add a bit more snow to this scene, like in front of the car and the critters. So I'm just masking off any bits that I don't want to get any splatter on. And then I'm going back to my Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White and adding that to my block, watering it down a bit to make it more fluid. And then I'm going to tap that off the side so that I have some snowfall that is going in front of the car and the gifts, and the trees and the mountains, and it just looks more like that snowy scene that I was trying to capture. So once I'm done with that, I will just remove those masks so you can see everything is protected, and did a little more tapping over on that right hand side so that there was a little bit of snowfall over there as well. A little bit more on the front of the card, just very careful not getting that paintbrush wet again, but just using what was already on it. And then I'm going to take some Stardust Stickles and add it to the edges of my snow-capped mountains, because we have to have a little sparkle on a Christmas card, right? So I added it there, and then I'm also going to put it on the ribbons on the 3 gifts, and also on the headlights so that they have a little bit of shine to them. And I did put it on the Christmas bow as well. And then to match the snow caps on the mountains, I'll also add it to the snow on the roof of the car and at the top edge of the hillside. So once I'm done with that, that is going to finish off my card for today. So I will lift that up to the camera so you can see all of the details. I hope that you enjoyed this one. I had a really fun time creating it. There's another peek at the inside. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. You can leave me a comment down below. I love chatting with you guys. All of the products that I used will be listed and linked for you in the description bar below. And if you'd like to keep watching, here is day 16 of the previous 2 years of holiday card series. I also have playlists for all of my card series going back since I started, way back I think in 2015. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.